The coffee hits her blazer before she even registers the tray tipping. Cynthia Han stands perfectly still in the middle of the Hyundai Group marketing floor, brown liquid sliding down white silk, and nobody moves to help her. CEO Eugene doesn't apologize. She doesn't even look at the stain. She looks at the small crowd that's gathered near the printer, and she smiles like she's just done something clever. "Careful next time," Eugene says, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. "Some of us actually have important things to carry." Laughter. Not everyone's, but enough. Enough that it lands the way it's meant to. Cynthia reaches for a tissue from her own desk drawer, because nobody offers one, and she dabs at the stain with hands that do not shake, because 3 years of watching people underestimate her has taught her exactly how to hold her face when it matters most. Across the floor, Kong Dian stands up so fast his chair rolls back into the desk behind him. He's halfway to her before he catches himself, because he knows, he's watched this play out for 2 months now, that if he says what he wants to say, it will only make things worse for her. He hands her his own jacket instead. Doesn't say a word. Just drapes it over her shoulders and glares at Eugene with a look that could crack marble. "I'm fine, Dian," Cynthia says quietly. She isn't fine, but she's close. Closer than any of them know. Because in 4 days, the chairman is visiting this office for the first time in 2 years. And when he walks through those doors, every single person on this floor is about to learn exactly whose daughter they've been pouring coffee on. 6 weeks earlier, Cynthia Han had spent 11 years abroad, boarding school in Geneva, a design degree in London, 3 years cutting her teeth at a boutique branding firm in New York that had no idea whose name was on her passport. Her father, Han Suk-jin, chairman of Hyundai Group, had built an empire out of hotels, resorts, and design houses across 4 continents, and Cynthia had spent most of her life watching people's faces change the moment they learned who her father was. She was tired of that face, the sudden warmth, the recalculated respect, the way people stopped listening to what she actually said the second they found out what she was worth. So when it was finally time to come home and take her place in the company, she made one request of her father before she'd agree to it. "Don't announce me," she said. "Let me start at the bottom. Let people respect my work before they respect my name." Han Suk-jin, a man who rarely smiled but never once doubted his daughter, agreed to almost all of it. Almost. What he didn't tell her, because he assumed it wouldn't matter, was that he'd already informed the Seoul office that his daughter would be starting soon, in the design and brand strategy division, so that HR could quietly clear the paperwork and security could quietly clear her badge. He never sent a photo. There had never been a need to. His daughter had barely appeared in Korean press in over a decade, and the one interview she'd given as a teenager was long buried in an archive nobody at Hyundai had bothered to dig up. Director Oh Min-ho, who ran the Seoul design floor, took the instruction and did what mid-level managers under pressure always do. He told his team the only thing he actually knew. "The chairman's daughter starts Monday. Treat her well. Very well." He didn't know her name. He didn't know her face. He knew, only, that she was coming. And on that same Monday, by nothing more than the ordinary churn of a large company's hiring calendar, 2 new employees walked into the design and brand strategy division for the first time. One was Cynthia Han, dressed plainly, introducing herself only by her first name, asking to be treated like anyone else. The other was CEO Eugene. The mistake. Eugene had grown up 2 neighborhoods away from money she could see but never touch, private academies she watched from the outside, cafes she could afford exactly once a month. She was sharp, ambitious, and had spent her whole adult life certain that the only thing standing between her and the life she deserved was a single lucky break. That Monday, she got one, just not the one she thought. Director O, flustered and short-staffed, greeted both new hires in the lobby within minutes of each other. Cynthia, quiet and unassuming, gave only her first name and asked where she should sit. Eugene, sensing and opening the way some people sense weather changing, stepped forward first, straightened her spine, and answered every question with the polish of someone who'd rehearsed for this exact morning her whole life. "I'm ready to start immediately," she said smoothly, extending a hand. "I know this role is important." Director O, already anxious about impressing the chairman's daughter, latched onto the sharper, more confident of the 2 young women standing in front of him and made an assumption he never bothered to verify. He turned to Eugene with something close to reverence. Welcome, Miss CEO. We're honored to have you. Please, let me show you to your office personally. Eugene blinked. For one full second, she almost corrected him. Then she looked past his shoulder at the floor beyond, the glass walls, the skyline view, the hush of people who worked for a company worth more than her entire hometown. And she said nothing at all. Cynthia, standing a few feet away, watched the exchange with quiet curiosity rather than alarm. She assumed it was a simple administrative mix-up, easily fixed by the end of the day. She didn't correct it either, not out of scheming, but because she wanted to see, honestly, how long it would take someone to actually ask her name. Nobody asked. Not that day. Not for 6 weeks. Cynthia was quietly assigned a desk in the open floor with the junior associates. Eugene was given a private office with a view, 3 assistants who weren't technically hers, and a level of deference that grew a little more absurd every single day nobody corrected it. 6 weeks of watching. Cynthia could have fixed it in an afternoon. A single phone call to HR, a single document pulled from her father's office, and the entire misunderstanding would have collapsed. She thought about it more than once. But something else was happening on that floor, something that mattered more to her than being seen correctly. She was watching her father's company the way no chairman's daughter ever gets to watch it. Unfiltered, unguarded, exactly as it behaved when it believed no one important was looking. What she saw troubled her. She saw Director O approve vendor contracts without reading them, because Eugene, playing the role handed to her with growing confidence, waved them through with a bored flick of her hand. She saw 2 senior designers quietly demoted in a headcount review that nobody explained, their work reassigned to less capable people with better connections. She saw invoices for a rebranding campaign that had never actually launched, paid out in full anyway. And she saw herself, day after day, treated as exactly what everyone assumed she was. Nobody. A junior hire with a soft voice and an unfamiliar accent, easy to interrupt in meetings, easy to leave off invitations, easy to blame when something went wrong that wasn't her fault. Eugene was the worst of it, and the most interesting part of it. At first, she'd seemed almost embarrassed by the mistake, cautious, unsure how far to take it. But respect, once poured into a person who's never had it before, works like water finding a crack. Within 2 weeks, she was ordering the office lunch menu changed. Within 4, she was correcting people's Korean honorifics when they addressed her without enough deference. By week 5, she'd taken over presenting a campaign concept that Cynthia herself had quietly designed at 11 p.m. 2 nights earlier, emailing it to Eugene's assistant under a shared drive because she'd been told, flatly, that first-year associates didn't present in front of directors. Cynthia sat in the back of that meeting and watched Eugene present her own work back to the room, watched Director O nod along like every word was scripture, and felt something settle in her chest that wasn't quite anger. It was closer to clarity. This is what my father's company looks like, she thought, when it thinks it's unwatched. There was exactly one person on that floor who never once treated her like nobody. Duyun. Kong Duyun had joined Hyundai's design team 2 years earlier, quiet and steady in a way that made him easy to overlook in a building full of people trying very hard to be noticed. He didn't chase Eugene's favor the way half the floor did. He didn't flatter her borrowed authority. If anything, he seemed faintly suspicious of the entire arrangement from the start, though he couldn't have said exactly why. What he noticed instead was Cynthia. The way she stayed 40 minutes after everyone left to redo work that had been credited to someone else without complaint. The way she asked sharp, precise questions in meetings that nobody bothered to answer. The way she never once raised her voice, even when Eugene humiliated her in front of clients. Even when a coffee tray accidentally tipped in her direction not once, but 3 separate times. He started small, bringing her coffee before the morning meetings, unprompted, because he'd noticed she never had time to get her own. Staying late to help her double-check numbers nobody had asked him to check. Standing, more than once, between her and Eugene's sharper comments, redirecting the conversation with the kind of calm firmness that made people back down without ever quite realizing they'd been managed. You don't have to do that, Cynthia told him one night. The two of them the last ones on the floor, the city lights spread out gold and endless behind the glass. Do what? Defend me. It isn't your job. Duyun considered that for a moment, the way he considered most things, slowly and without performance. I'm not defending you because it's my job, he said. I'm defending you because it's the right thing to do. And apparently, I'm the only person on this floor who's noticed that's in short supply. Cynthia didn't tell him who she really was. Not that night, not for weeks after. Partly because the lie, at this point, wasn't even hers to unwind. It belonged to Director O's assumption and Eugene's silence. But mostly because for the first time in her adult life, she'd found someone who was kind to her for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with a name on a corporate registry. She wasn't ready to find out if that would survive the truth. The warning. 3 days before the chairman's scheduled visit, the office buzzed with a very different kind of energy. Word had gone around. Chairman Han Suk-jin himself was coming to Seoul, his first visit to this floor in 2 years, and, everyone assumed, coming specifically to check in on his daughter. Eugene, to her credit, understood exactly what this meant, and for the first time in 6 weeks, something like fear crept into her composure. A chairman who had never met his own daughter in person, arriving to a floor where she'd been playing that role for 6 weeks. There was no version of that meeting that ended well for her, and she knew it. She considered, briefly, resigning before he arrived, disappearing quietly, letting the misunderstanding die with her absence. But 6 weeks of unearned respect had rewired something in her. She'd started to believe, in the specific, dangerous way that people believe things they desperately want to be true, that she could talk her way through anything. That confidence alone had gotten her this far. Surely it could get her through one more room. Instead of leaving, she did something crueler. She looked around the floor for someone to blame in advance, in case things went sideways, and her eyes landed on the one person quiet enough, powerless enough, patient enough to make an easy target. That Friday afternoon, in front of the entire design floor, Eugene picked up a printed campaign deck, the one Cynthia had built from nothing over 11 late nights, and dropped it, unceremoniously, onto Cynthia's desk. "This is sloppy," she said, loud enough to carry. "Amateur. I don't know how you got hired, honestly. If the chairman sees work like this with my name anywhere near it, you're going to be the reason I look bad." The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when everyone senses something is about to happen that they'll talk about at lunch for a week. Cynthia looked down at the deck. Her deck. Every slide, every word, every careful, considered choice, dismissed in front of 30 people by a woman wearing a title that had never belonged to her. She didn't raise her voice. She never did. "Careful," Cynthia said, quiet and even. "You might want to check whose name is actually supposed to be on that before Monday." Eugene laughed, sharp and short. "Excuse me." "Nothing," Cynthia said, and picked the deck back up and went back to work. Deun, watching from 3 desks away, didn't laugh. He'd caught something in her voice that nobody else in that room had the context to hear. He just didn't know yet what it meant. Monday. The chairman's car arrived at 9:14 a.m. The floor had been cleaned twice. Director O had rehearsed his greeting in the bathroom mirror. Eugene had worn her sharpest blazer, rehearsed her sharpest smile, and positioned herself, with practiced casualness, exactly where a chairman's daughter would naturally be standing. Near the front, near the good light, ready to be seen. The elevator doors opened. Han Suk-jin stepped out first, silver-haired, composed, the kind of presence that didn't need volume to fill a room. Beside him, a step behind, was a woman the office didn't recognize at first. Tall, elegant, Nigerian-American, dressed simply and beautifully, her eyes moving across the floor with the specific alertness of someone looking for one particular face. Cynthia Han, the chairman's wife, Cynthia's mother. Director O stepped forward, bowing low, already turning toward Eugene with the eager, practiced warmth of 6 weeks of misplaced deference. "Chairman, welcome. We are so honored. Your daughter has settled in beautifully. She's been..." He didn't get to finish the sentence, because Cynthia Han had already stopped walking. Her eyes had already found the one face in that room that actually belonged to her, standing quietly near the back by the window, the exact same spot she'd been standing in for 6 weeks, and her whole face broke open with a smile 11 years in the making. "Cynthia," she said, and crossed the floor in 7 quick steps, and pulled her daughter into her arms in front of the entire company. The room did not go quiet. The room went silent. The specific, total silence of 40 people simultaneously recalculating everything they thought they understood. Director O's face drained of every ounce of color. I don't, Chairman, I was told." Han Suk-jin wasn't looking at him. He was looking past him, at Eugene, standing frozen in the exact spot she'd claimed as her own for 6 weeks, her sharpest blazer suddenly looking like a costume 2 sizes too big. "And you are?" the chairman asked. Calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Eugene opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "She's a new hire," Cynthia said, stepping out of her mother's arms, her voice carrying easily across the frozen floor. "She started the same day I did. There was a mix-up with names 6 weeks ago, and she decided it was more useful to let it stand than to correct it." "I didn't," Eugene started. "You presented my work as yours on Thursday," Cynthia said, still calm, still even, the same voice she'd used every single time this woman had humiliated her. "In front of this entire floor. You changed the lunch menu because you didn't like the smell of what a junior associate ordered. You let people bow to you for 6 weeks knowing exactly whose bow it was supposed to be. Somewhere near the front, someone made a small, strangled sound, the specific noise of a person realizing, in real time, exactly how many times they'd laughed along." Han Suk-jin turned to Director Oh, whose bow had deepened into something closer to a full collapse. "You had 6 weeks, the chairman said quietly, to ask one simple question. What is her name?" He didn't raise his voice either. He didn't need to. The whole floor had already understood, in the space of about 90 seconds, exactly how badly they'd misjudged the 2 women standing in front of them. What came after? Cynthia didn't fire everyone. She thought about it. She'd have been well within her rights. But 3 years of watching companies get gutted by righteous fury had taught her something her father had always believed too. Punishment that doesn't correct anything is just theater. Director O kept his job, on the condition that he sat through, and personally led, a full review of every promotion and headcount decision made in the last 6 weeks, starting with the 2 senior designers who'd been quietly demoted to make room for Eugene's borrowed authority. Both were reinstated within the month, with back pay. Eugene was let go, not for the mistake itself, which was never really hers to begin with, but for 6 weeks of choosing, deliberately and repeatedly, to deepen a lie that had cost other people their dignity, their credit, and in 2 cases, their jobs. Cynthia made sure the termination was quiet. She didn't need to make an example of her. The floor had already done that on its own, in real time, the moment the truth walked out of the elevator. The rebranding invoices for the campaign that never launched turned out to be exactly what Cynthia suspected. A vendor kickback scheme Director O had waved through without reading, 3 months running. That review went to compliance. Nobody went to prison. But the money came back, and the vendor didn't. Kang Dian found out who she really was, standing in the same spot he'd stood for 6 weeks, 3 desks away, watching a woman he'd defended without knowing her name turn out to be the reason the entire building had a roof over it. He didn't approach her that day. He let her have the floor, the reunion, the reckoning that belonged to her. He found her that evening instead, on the same floor, the city lights gold and endless behind the glass. Exactly the way they'd been the night she told him he didn't have to defend her. "You could have told me," he said. Not angry, just quiet, the way he was about most things. "I know. Why didn't you?" Cynthia considered the question longer than she needed to, because the honest answer mattered more than a quick one. "Because you were the only person who was kind to me for free," she said. No name attached. No company behind it. I didn't want to find out if that would survive the truth. Duyun stepped closer, close enough that the city lights blurred gold behind him too. "Test it," he said. So she did. 6 months later, Cynthia Han sat in the corner office that had once briefly, absurdly, belonged to someone else. Not as a chairman's daughter parachuted into power, but as the newly appointed head of design and brand strategy, a title she'd earned twice over, first in silence and then in daylight. Kang Duyun ran point on client strategy 2 doors down, and made a point, every single morning, of bringing her coffee before she had to ask. Neither of them ever let a tray tip over again.